In today's video, I'm going to be replacing this oil filter housing on the Audi A3. Hello and a very warm welcome to another video from Auto Night. Now I bought this Audi A3 1.6 TDI back at the end of last year, and not long after I noticed it had a very slight coolant loss and a bit of a coolant smell from the engine bay. Now one thing that's quite common on these 1.6 TDI, in fact many of the Volkswagen Group engines, is the oil filter housing, which is made of plastic and it contains an oil cooler. Coolant passes through it as well as oil, and coolant can leak from this particular housing as well as oil actually in some cases. So this is the part. It's very deep seated, it lives way down in there. You can just see this part of it down there. Now if you're really unlucky, the coolant can sometimes breach both of these seals and actually end up in your oilways, and if that happens you end up with mayonnaise. And by that I don't mean the delicious stuff you have in your ham sandwiches, I'm talking the nasty gloopy creamy mess that you end up with in your coolant tank and inside the oil filler cap. This isn't a really quick job. There are a few things to remove from above and below, and it's also a really good opportunity to clean out the EGR pipe and also the port and various other bits that do get very clogged up on these diesel engines. Moving on to the parts, I've got a Phoebe Bilstein oil filter housing there, complete with the oil cooler. Got it from Autodoc, it was a great price, about £70. I've got some genuine Volkswagen coolant here, it's G12 Evo Premix, and I got some Quantum Long Life 3 5W30, great brand Quantum from the Volkswagen Group again. I used their oils in all my cars, they come in all sorts of different types, viscosities and specifications with different approval ratings, and here we have a genuine Volkswagen oil filter. We're raised up on axle stands at the front and the rear wheel is chocked. With the engine cover off you can see it's quite buried down there. Gonna have to remove quite a few things. Haven't done this job before, so it's a bit trial and error. Get this intake pipe off here. That gives a whole lot more access down that side. I'm going to get the throttle body off, EGR pipe. Loosen Jubilee clips for this intake hose. Going to remove the engine under tray. It's held in place by a whole bunch of T25s around the side, and at the back edge there are some T30s as well. Undo these T25s, under tray off. With the under tray off, I'm now going to remove this hose clip, release this hose, and then this will drain the coolant out. Release this hose and be prepared for a lot of coolant. Releasing the coolant reservoir cap allows a whole lot more to drain out. This intake pipe will need to be removed to gain access, and also for me to clean out my EGR system. So I need to remove this. Remove this electrical connector right here, tuck that out of the way, and various other pipes are attached to this intake hose, which shouldn't be too difficult to free off. There we go, that's separated. Now I just need to see how this is fixed to the engine so it can be released and unbolted. Easier to see from this side, but there is a bolt right there that needs to be undone. It's a T30 and the run of the belt to the aircon compressor makes it a little bit difficult to undo. that is loosened. There's clearly something else holding it, as there's not a lot of movement even though it's been loosened. Let's see what else is holding this pipe in place. Accessibility is difficult, and I'm using a UJ on the torque socket to get to this. It's up between the compressor and the pipe. Very difficult to film and very difficult to get at. Both bolts are undone on a pipe, and I cannot explain how difficult that upper one was to get to, even with the UJ on the end of the extension. Now it's time to separate this top pipe here, and that then allows the entire pipe assembly to come out through the bottom of the car. And here it is. So let's just take a moment to see what I've just removed. So intake pipe as it would be on the engine here. This T30 here is the first thing I undid. That was somewhat hindered by the run of the belt to the aircon compressor, which was kind of about here. And then this is the really hard to get to bolt. I needed the UJ for that. You can't get to it as such, you can kind of just see it, but it's because you've got the aircon compressor right here. But thank God these are retained in the pipe, because you'd never get that one up there. I bet no one would ever put that back. So you've got the sensor here, and this secures one of the hoses. I'm now going to remove this throttle body. Remove the connector. So we loosen these 3 T30 bolts that secure the throttle body to the intake manifold. The 3 bolts have been removed from the throttle body, and that now comes away. Now at this point I have actually got pretty good access to the oil filter housing, but I am going to remove this EGR pipe. I am doing this because I expect it to be blocked, unless it's been apart before, which it doesn't seem as if it has. I had an Audi A3 with a PD engine a few years ago, and the EGR system on that was block solid. And once I cleared all that out, it went like a rocket. It was unbelievable. The whole throttle system was just gunged up. But I'm going to take this off. It's a 5mm Allen key there, and a couple of, I think they're probably like T30s, most things are on this. That's the clamp that was on here. Helpful to get these screws out, bolts, with a magnet. A moment of truth. What are we going to find in here? Well, I've seen a lot worse. It's not that bad actually. These 2 bolts here are actually tiny little splined bolts or screws. I definitely don't have anything splined that small, so I'm going to use this T27, which will do the trick. That's pretty nasty too, but I'll be giving that a good clean up as well. Now back to the very reason why we're even doing this job, and that's to remove this oil filter. There's one coolant pipe connection which is down there, so on the left hand side of it if you were in the driver's seat. That can be accessed from underneath, because that's where the clip is. So I'm going to get under there now and release that. It is quite a reach, it could be a little bit tricky. It is up there, but I'm going to remove this hose here so I can actually get my hand in there, because right now I'm not going to be able to get my bloody great hands up there. Let's remove that off the auxiliary water pump. A bit more drippage. And now I can get right up there to the other one. That hose clip is now removed. The filter housing is bolted in place by 4 8mm spline bolts. These must be undone. The only one that's difficult to access is the lower one on this side. It's easier to get to that from underneath. It's also at this point I realised that the dipstick is also attached to it in some way. I think it's a plastic clip. Just going to investigate that. Okay, so this is proving to be a bit of a cow on a number of levels. My hands give you an idea. The dipstick was held into the housing with this little kind of plastic rivet with a press-in insert, but would it separate for love or money? No, it would not. Now, I've actually just smashed off a piece of the oil filter housing just to free it off, because this is trash anyway. So this is about to come out now. In the end, I had to disconnect this pipe, which is the pipe that goes from the metal coolant hose to the oil filter housing. I had to disconnect it from this actual metal pipe here because I couldn't get in to release it from the actual body of the oil filter housing. So it's about to come out now. It's essentially out. I've just got to negotiate this area here and get it through here, which is easier said than done with the camera in my hand. Okay, the old one's out. It was a bit of a bitch to do, to be honest. I'm not enjoying this job. It's something that should be fairly straightforward. It's actually really annoying. Now, worse still, I'm looking in here now and I'm not seeing evidence of a disintegrated area here. So, was this even leaking? We may never know. The mating surface is nicely cleaned up and it's ready to accept the new oil filter housing. Here we go, old versus new. Old one here, I had to snip this bit off, which was that bit there that you can see on the new one. The dipstick tube of the car was fitted to that with something similar to this, plastic rivet with the press-in insert, but it was seized absolutely solid. It was a cow. I had to mangle it, and in the end I couldn't even get it out that way, so I had to just cut that bit off and deal with it once this was out the way, or this one rather. But that was annoying. Be prepared for that. It's a small thing but so annoying. That's the new one I'm going to use. It's a fairly regular one, fairly frequently used on vehicle trims, but that's what I'll use on the new one, which you can see will fit in there nicely. Other than that, they are the same arrangement here. I've got to swap that pipe across to that one and then it can go back on the car. The filter housing is ready to go back on the car, but before it does, I'm just going to put a very small amount of red rubber grease on this seal. Just a bit, I don't want to go mad with it. And just before I go to refit this housing, I'm going to remove this clip, get this pipe out of the way, and that'll give me a really clear access to it. Don't forget to make sure that there's no antifreeze or oil in the bolt holes. It's important to not have anything in there, as you'll create a hydraulic action when you screw in the bolts. It's all back together. Refitting is just the reversal of removal. Did it all with my fair hands. The engine fairies did not come in and do this for me. Just some points to note: the EGR system here, the pipe, and also the insert in here that were quite sooty, they were taken off, as you saw, and I immersed those in a vat of paraffin. They came up beautifully. I also cleaned the throttle body here, the moving part with the butterfly. I cleaned that area of this throttle body with some brake cleaner and got rid of all the soot that was building up in there as well. The clip arrangement that secures the dipstick tube to the oil filter I deemed to be quite lame. I couldn't actually push the pin in on the clip anyway when I tried to reassemble that, so I made a slight change to the fixing method, and I used a T30 bolt and also a Nylock 10mm nut and a couple of washers. Much better arrangement if I ever have to take this off again. In terms of coolant, it was refilled slowly, and taking into account the drop in coolant level once the thermostat opened, it actually took exactly 5 litres. Couldn't have worked that out any better. So all the coolant that I had, it took. The coolant level is bang on the line, exactly where it needs to be, and let's hope it stays there. When this housing was removed and the coolant came gushing out, there was a risk that some of that coolant might have made its way into the oil galleries. So for that reason, I'm going to be changing the engine oil and filter. It's also nearly done 115,000 miles as well, so it's due its oil change. I change the oil in all my cars at 5,000 miles or every year, whichever comes first. I'll be carrying out this oil change off camera. If you want to see how it's done, please see my Audi A3 service video, which I'll leave a link to at the end of this video. So that's it for another video. I do hope this is useful if you have a Volkswagen Group car and you're experiencing similar issues or need to change out your oil filter housing. Do feel free to like and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you in another video very soon. Meantime, thank you and goodbye.